فلذلك فادع واستقم كما أمرت ولا تتبع أهواءهم وقل آمنت بما أنزل الله من كتاب.
الحمد لله وصلى الله وسلم على نبينا Muhammad وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. So we left off in the middle of the chapter of Tayammum in our last class here in Abu Shujaa. And so we're going to pick up where we left off because we talked about that there's 5 conditions for Tayammum. And a part of it has to do with like the state of the individual. Like the individual needs to have an excuse. And that excuse, the author here, he said either from traveling or sickness. And like a little more like general or a bigger way of looking at it is that it needs to be an excuse from either having water or not being able to use water. So so if you don't have water, you can't find water, it's not around, or you're not able to use the water, whether it's because you're sick or because or like the water, like you have a bandage on your arm or something, and you can't get the water to under that bandage, except that it's going to cause like problems and whatnot. Then these are like the 2 main reasons. And then he also says the other conditions for it, as well as like making sure that the time for that salah has entered, because this is connected with that time, and this is a rukhsa. So of course we stick to the basis of that, and we don't necessarily make qiyas on wudu, that the wudu stays with you as long as you haven't broken it. But this is something that we don't take that over to wudu. We keep it at the basis of how it is, and also this is something that's narrated on some of the Sahaba, that it is that is in that way. And so then also looking for water. The water needs to, you need to make sure that there's no water, of course, and also the inability to use the water. As I mentioned, like if there's like a bandage or there's a big cut or wound or something that's going to cause festering or any problems. So this is like an inability to use the water, or because someone is on a journey and they are scared that this water, if they use it for wudu, then they're not going to have anything to drink on the rest of the journey. And so they fear for themselves in that way. So it's something that they can keep the water with them, and they don't need to use it, and it's as if they don't have water in that case. And the last one is like pure dirt to use the tayammum. This is like something that needs to be pure dirt. And also like the Shafi'i opinion is that it needs to have like gubar, which is like dust. It needs to have like that dust. So and this is the pureness of it, as I mentioned a little bit in the last one. It's something that just like we have pure water that purifies, we also need to have pure dirt that purifies. So it's like the Shafi'is, they'll say that the dirt itself needs to be unused previously for tayammum. So if I use the dirt for tayammum before, and I'm using the exact same dirt that's still left on my hands or whatever, it needs to be new dirt. So it can't be used dirt that was already used for tayammum before. And the same thing as if there's like any Najaasah in the dirt, it needs to be pure dirt, because it's a type of purity. And so this is, and then we talked about the fard, the obligatory, like the farida, the obligatory actions, which are the 4 things, these are the main 4 things that are mentioned, which is 1, the niyyah. And the actual word tayammum includes, like, this means like having the intention for something. So tayammum is like intending, or it's qasd in Arabic. And so like tayammum itself, it has that meaning of niyyah. So of course this is a part of like that we need to have this niyyah when making it, as it's even like enclosed it's like included in the actual word of tayammum. And so then the other one is the wiping the face. And the wiping the face is like the same thing that we talked about. The face for making wudu is the same area for the face when making tayammum. And of course this is after having hit the ground. So we hit the ground with our hands, and we have the dirt that's on our hands, and then we wipe our face with it and make sure that we cover all of the place with the dirt that's there. And then after that, it says here, then wiping the hands, and he says up to the elbows here. And so you'd wipe the hands, and then he says up to the elbows, and that would be like something up to here, and also wiping the other hands and up to the elbows. And the up to the elbows, as I mentioned before, this is like, and so we're making like we're seeing the hands that are referred to in the beginning of the ayah that talks about wudu. Then hands are referred to at the end of the ayah. So it the view of like the majority of the Shafi'i view is that this is the same hands that are there and the same hands that are here. And it's not just the the yed that's mentioned before is the same yed that's mentioned at the end of it, unless like some other evidence came. And so of course, like there is a Sahih hadith that the Prophet ﷺ, he only wiped his hands, like the kaffain, when he was saying this would be enough for somebody to make a tayammum, that this would be enough. And he wiped his face and he wiped his hands, just the kaf, without going up to the elbows. So this is also a valid view, and it's also a view inside of the madhab. There's the opinion that this is not something that is a part of the that this is not obligatory to go up to the elbow, but rather the hands is enough. And this is a view within the madhab, and that many of the other scholars outside of the madhab, they chose this as the strongest view, and because of the hadith and its apparent meaning, this is the view that many of the scholars, they point to, and they say this is what the hadith gives the most weight to. And so then the fourth thing of this is going in order, at-tartib, which means going in order. So making sure that all of these actions are done in order, which is like the niyyah, of course, is the first thing, and then hitting the ground, and then bringing it, and the niyyah encompasses while bringing it to the face, and then it'd be the face first, and then hitting again, and then wiping the hands. So there'd be two hits. There'd be one hit for the putting it on the face, and one hit for wiping the hands to make sure that there's dirt that is gonna encompass covering the hands for both of these. And Allah knows best. And so then the next thing the author here he mentions is, he says, وَسُنُنُهُ ثَلَاثَةُ أَشْيَاء. And so he says the sunan actions, there's three of these sunnah actions. And the first of them is at-tasmiyatu, and this is saying Bismillah. And tasmiyah is like means from like saying the name, or like giving the name, which is like saying Bismillah when starting it. And there's a difference between Basmala and tasmiyah. And like tasmiyah, it means saying Bismillah, and basmala is like another word which means saying Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. So for like tasmiyah, we say tasmiyah if we're referring to, like, this is like in wudu, or in tayammum we'd say tasmiyah, or at the beginning of ghusl they would say tasmiyah. And if they would and also like before eating, we would say this is tasmiyah, like it's sunnah to make the tasmiyah, which is saying Bismillah just itself, because this is the name of Allah that we'll say. But for certain things, such as like before reciting Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, we say it's obligatory to say Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, and this would be called the Basmala. And so that's a technical term with Arabic, that there's a slight difference between tasmiyah and basmala, and that's that benefit there. And so and this is something just like wudu. We said that it was sunnah for wudu, and then we also said it was sunnah for ghusl. So and it's the same thing here, because it's a form of purity. So saying Bismillah is something that the author here he says is sunnah, and there's no like text that shows that the Prophet ﷺ he said Bismillah, but rather this is something from the that is taken from other texts, and making qiyas on that. And so he says here, the next one after that is وَتَقْدِيمُ الْيُمْنَى عَلَى الْيُسْرَى, which is starting with the right hand before the left. And so this is just like it was before, that the Prophet ﷺ, he used to كَانَ يُحِبُّ التَّيَمُّمْ فِي شَأْنِهِ كُلِّهِ, and that the Prophet ﷺ, he used to love starting with his right in all of the things that he would do. And also like in the hadith of Aisha, she says in his of the things that she mentions is when he makes tahara. And so this is of the things that we'd start with our right first, and then we go with the left. And this is a normal thing in anything that is like a thing that is honorable action. Then we would start with tayammum, or we would start with the right hand before the left. And so then also in the next the last thing here that he says is doing it continuously. So if someone starts and then they wipe their face, and then they wait a long time before their hands, it's sunnah for them to do their to do their hands right away without any break between them. And this is also similar to as it is in wudu. And so the next thing that he brings in here is he wants to talk about what breaks tayammum. And it's similar, like anything, like he says here, the first thing, وَالَّذِي يُبْطِلُ التَّيَمُّمَ ثَلَاثَةُ أَشْيَاء. So whatever invalidates, like ibtal, or yubtil is invalidates التَّيَمُّم. What invalidates the tayammum is three things. And so the first thing is whatever nullifies wudu. And this is a general concept. Anything that nullifies wudu also nullifies tayammum. And this is in general. So if we take that, whatever we said about wudu, this is what it encompasses for tayammum. And since tayammum is a rukhsa, it also is weaker than wudu. Wudu is stronger than tayammum. So there's a couple things that also break the tayammum. And the tayammum is broken also with, he says, وَرُؤْيَةُ الْمَاءِ فِي غَيْرِ وَقْتِ الصَّلَاةِ. And so he says, and seeing water, and then he says, min ghayri waqti salah, outside of the salah. So when you're not inside of salah, if you've already started your tayammum, or like you've started your salah after making tayammum, and you're allowed to make tayammum, and this salah is something that is like, if you weren't to see water otherwise, this salah would be valid for you. Then in this case, if you were to see water come, a guy comes with, or like somebody comes with water, and you know, okay, there's water now. Do I need to break the salah, or do I keep going with the salah because I started it, and this is something I should finish? And so this is the madhab Shafi'i is that this tayammum is valid for you to start the salah, and if it was valid for you to start the salah, it's valid for you to finish it. But if you were to have seen it outside of the salah before you started, even just like a second before you say Allahu Akbar, you see the water, then it's not, then your tayammum is no longer valid, and you need to go use the water to make actual wudu, or the full purity. And so this is the view of the Shafi'i madhab. And of course, like, there's a basic principle. There's things that are in the middle, like things that in the middle you are allowed to start something, and then the thing in the middle, like now that changes. In that case, you're allowed to finish things that you wouldn't be allowed to start normally. And so like this is a general principle. So like if you were allowed to start something and you had like a rukhsa in it, and then like the rukhsa seems to go away in the middle of what you're doing, if you already had it, then you can finish it off, because that is you're allowed to finish things that you wouldn't be able to start with. And this is a big qaida, or a principle that comes into a lot of different areas, and this is one of them. And also like it is sunnah, like to leave the difference of opinion. So especially if you're not an obligatory salah and water does come, like it's sunnah for you to make actual wudu and then go into salah again. And like that, if it was like a obligatory salah, like leaving the difference of opinion in this, because many of the different scholars in the other madhahib, they will say that this is something that breaks the salah itself, and Allah knows best. And then the last one here that he mentions is, he says, وَالرِّدَّةِ. And we seek Allah's refuge from that, which is leaving Islam. And may Allah protect us from that. But this is something, as opposed to wudu. Wudu, if somebody was to say, they were to say something that took them outside of Islam, they say something that is like kufr or whatever, and they leave Islam, and then they say, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, Ashhadu anna Muhammadur Rasulullah, and they turn back at whatever they said that was kufr, they repent from that, and they turn away from that. Then in this case, that time between this and that, do they still have wudu? And if they had made wudu, they still have wudu, because nothing changed in the fact of like they're still in that state of purity, and even though they left and they went back, that's like the general thing is that the person is pure until proven otherwise. But in the case of ridda, when it comes to tayammum is weak. And tayammum is a rukhsa, and a rukhsa is only valid when it comes to someone who is in obedience. So someone who is in disobedience, then this rukhsa doesn't work for them, because they're in a state of disobedience. So of course, if they leave Islam, then in this case they no longer have the rukhsa. They don't get any special treatment with that. And then when they come back, alhamdulillah, they came back, but they need to make tayammum, because the rukhsa is no good for someone while they're outside of Islam. And so so that's an issue that they bring up here. And of course, this is something that is it's taking the place. It's like the badal, which takes the place of wudu. So it's not quite as strong as wudu would be, in that it stays with that person in that case. And so the next thing that the author he talks about some of like for someone who's sick. So he says وَصَاحِبُ الْجَبَائِرِ يَمْسَحُ عَلَيْهَا. And so he says, and the person, or like the person with a cast, or jaba'ir, which is the plural of cast, or like it's something that would be put on someone's arm to fix it into its place. Like if you had a broken arm or something, then he says here they can wipe over the cast. وَيَتَيَمَّمُ وَيُصَلِّي. And they make tayammum, and then they pray. And so he says here they wipe over the cast, meaning that when they make wudu, they wipe over the cast with the water that they have. Even though, yes, they're not making it to the skin, which is what is required of someone, but rather they will make the wudu as much as they can, because the thing that you can do doesn't drop. You still need to make wudu as much as you can, and then for the part that you can't make, then you make tayammum for that. So he says you wipe over the cast, like if it was like if you had a khuf, you would wipe over the khuf. So looking at it like treating it like it's a khuf with qiyas here, he would wipe over the cast, and then he makes tayammum because he didn't actually wash the skin under it for that lacking. He makes tayammum, and then he prays, and then he says here وَلَا عِيَادَةَ عَلَيْهِ. And he says, and there's no like i'ada, which is like bringing back to make up that prayer. It's like bringing it back in Arabic, but it means like to make up that prayer. He doesn't need to make up those prayers that he prayed with that. And then he gives the condition here, and he says, "In kana wada'aha ala tuhrin." If he put the jabira, or like the jabair, which is like if he put the cast or cast on when he was in a state of tahara. And this is like looking at it like it's a khuf. So when we put on the khuf, we had to make sure that we're in a state of tahara. When we put on the khuf, like as we talked about in the last class, that he needs to have complete tahara when he puts on this, so that he can wipe on it afterwards. And so he makes, and so this is the qiyas that is made on this, and this is the view of the majority of the like the Shafi'i opinion, that if he puts on the jabira, like he gets his cast done and he wasn't in a state of tahara, then all of those prayers that he prays, that he needs to make them up afterwards, because he didn't do as required of him. And this is the view of the Shafi'i view of this. And one of the greatest scholars of, like the students of Imam Shafi'i, was al-Muzni. He said he gave a basic principle, which pretty much the whole like the majority of the people, they will hold on to this principle for themselves, and which is any salah that the Sharia calls you to make, and there is some type of naqs in it, like there's some type of something missing, whether it's you don't have the proper clothes to wear, or you don't have the state of purity that you should have, and this any salah that you're commanded to do and you did it in the state that you were able to do it, then you don't need to make up the salah afterwards. And this is a basic principle that the majority of like the scholars of Shafi, they always mention this, and this is the thing that is actually like acted upon when it comes to this thing. So he says he makes this condition if he put it on in a state of purity, and if he didn't do that, then in this case they would say that he is a sinner for not making the state of purity, but rather but he wouldn't need to make it up on the view of al-Muzni, which is one of the greatest students of Imam Shafi'i, and he says that any salah that we're required to do, that there's some type of lack in it, and then we do that with that lack, then we don't need to make this up again, because we did what was required of us, as long as we did what we could do in that period of time, and Allah knows best. And so the next thing that he goes into is he talks about that when we make tayammum, how, like, what does this count for which salah? And I talked about this a little bit in the last class, but he says وَيَتَيَمَّمُ لِكُلِّ فَرِيضَةٍ وتيمموا لكل فريضة ويصلي بتيمم واحد ما شاء من النوافل. So he says that you make tayammum for each fard salah. So every time that there's a fard salah, we make tayammum for that fard salah, and then we can pray as many sunnah tayammum, or we can pray as many sunnah prayers as we want with one tayammum, and with that same tayammum that we prayed for the fard, we can use that for the for all of the other salahs that we want to make, as long as, of course, we don't break the tayammum. And so this is all that the author here brings in with this. And of course, the evidence for this is something that is relayed from Omar radiallahu anhu, that he says that someone makes tayammum for every single salah, even if he doesn't break his wudu. And so, of course, this is something that we look at, and we take this as we take it as if the Prophet ﷺ told him this, and then he's explaining it to the other people. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. And so, were there any questions about what we just went over before we move on to the next chapter here?
Yeah, assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
You stated that Muslims' view is that the prayer is completed with parts missing, like wiping over the cast. Before you talked about his view, you mentioned that some scholars believe you have to make that up, or did you say that was a view in the madhab itself? I got a little.
It's the view of the madhab of Shafi'i is that the person would have to make it up if they didn't put it on with tahara.
Mm-hmm.
This is like the view of the madhab of Shafi'i. But some of the scholars inside of the Shafi'i madhab, they have their own views. And this is what, outside of the madhab, this is not as far as I know, most other madhabs don't hold this view. But there might be some that hold it, but yeah, it's very strong. Like as far as like the evidence goes, because of course we need an evidence to tell us that this salat needs to be made up, and he's basically he's basically, if I did what was required of me and the time that was required of me, why would I need to do it again?
Okay, perfect. So Shafi himself had the opposite view.
This was the view that is based on his, that the madhab itself is strengthened, is that he would need to make it up, and he has this in many other places that will come up as well, not just in this particular chapter, but in other chapters as well. He has this basic concept where if there's something that is missing in the salah that is very rare and it's not something that is normal, then when that person prays in that time with that thing that's missing, if it's something that's rare, then they need to make up the salah again. And he has this, and there's a lot of other issues that will come up in the madhab, but this is a basic principle he holds on to. And the other countering principle is whatever you're called to do, and you did it with whatever with whatever thing that was lacking in it, but you did it in the best of your ability, whatever you could do, then you don't need to do it again. You did what was required of you. And so this makes things easier on the people. And of course, this is the acted upon opinion of the scholars of the madhab themselves. They don't necessarily act upon that. They always give the people this opinion when it comes to fatwa and whatnot. Wallahu ta'ala alam. Yeah.
And one more question. So when actually doing the tayammum on the cast, you do it for that fard salah, and generally you're making wudu inside. You should finish your wudu and then go make tayammum outside from the dirt on the ground, or are you allowed to use, like you mentioned in the last class, being able to hit the concrete? But from what I understand, that's only if you only have concrete, correct?
Allah says in the Quran, فَتَيَمَّمُوا سَعِيدًا طَيِّبًا. And sa'id is something that is on the face of it's like something that comes up on the face of the earth, and is normally translated as something tayyiba, which is something that is good, or something that Imam Shafi'i, when he explained this, it's something that grows. It's something that can grow. So it needs to be dirt. that could actually, you could grow something from it, in a certain case. So it needs to be actually dirt, and this is the majority. The majority view is that it needs to be dirt. It needs to actually be dirt. It can't just be something. But some of them, some of the madhabs would go a little. They would make it a little bigger when it comes to more than dirt. But the safer of the opinion and the view of the Shafi'i, the view of the Shafi'i madhab, it needs to be dirt that has like actual like dust inside of it.
Stick to dirt. Perfect.
Yeah, and you could make that afterwards. You could make this at the end of your wudu, like if you wanted to do wudu and then make it afterwards. But they need to come. You need to have both of them. Yeah, and Allah knows best.
All right, perfect. Jazakallah khair.
Oh yeah. All right. So after we went over many of the different things about how to make purity and whatnot, some of the things, of course, is there's two different types of impurity. One type of impurity is a state of being that's within the body itself, and this is something we don't see, like we don't necessarily see like the hadith, like the fact that I'm not in a state of purity. We don't necessarily see this. This is not something, it's something that is a state of being that was held within the body. And then there's another type of purity, which is a type of impurity, which is an actual thing. Like this thing is impure, and if you have this thing on you, or if it's on your clothes and whatnot when you're praying, then your clothes are not pure, and so it needs to be purified. And so this is the other type of impurity, which he has this chapter here, which is in talking about the chapter of Najaasah, which is unclean things. And so these are things that are unclean because it's not just because it's nasty. So like there's some things that we would think it's nasty or gross, but it's not necessarily Najaasah, such as like if someone was to have like phlegm or something, or if they blow their nose, like this is nasty, but it's not something that is najis. And so this is so there's certain things that come up that are najis, and that also maybe we wouldn't see them as necessarily nasty, but it's something that the Sharia has made this as that. So the first thing he talks about here in the chapter, he says fasl, which is like chapter, وَكُلُّ مَاءٍ خَرَجَ مِنَ السَّبِيلَيْنِ نَجِسٌ. And so this is the first principle he gives, and he gives an exception here, إِلَّا الْمَنِي. So he says in every ma'i', and ma'i' is a wet thing, or something that comes out that is wet. Every ma'i'an kharaja, which is exits the two pathways, which means like the urethra, like the two pathways of using the bathroom. And so like exits one of the two pathways or whatever, it's unclean. And then he gives the exception except for semen, and this is what he gives this exception. So of course, like any urine, feces, all of this, anything that comes out of the two pathways, even if it's not urine, maybe it's something else, anything that comes out, it's that's wet is najis. And so this also encompasses like pre-cum, like it's the pre-seminal fluid is what they would call it. This is also something that comes out of the two pathways, and this is what would be called medhi. In Arabic, we'd call it medhi, and this is something that comes out of the front pathway when someone is aroused, or after someone is aroused, and it's usually it's a fluid that is kind of sticky and whatnot, but it's not many, and many is the semen, and there's definitely a difference between these two. But this is something that comes out. Maybe someone maybe they feel it, maybe they don't feel it, and maybe they have they know about it or they don't know about it. But this is something that is najis, and so if someone ever finds it on their clothes and whatnot, it's something that they would need to wash. And this also comes like in regards to this particular thing. This is something that comes in a hadith in Bukhari and Muslim, that Ali, he says that I was a man that had a lot of medhi that would like befall him. And so he said, and I was shy to ask the Prophet ﷺ about like what I should do about this, like when it comes out, like what am I supposed to do? And of course, like this is because he is like the son-in-law of the Prophet ﷺ, and he's married to the Prophet ﷺ's daughter. So this is something that is that's best not to discuss with your father-in-law. And so he asked Miqdad ibn Aswad to ask the Prophet ﷺ for him, so that it's not him that asks him right away. And so the Prophet ﷺ said it has wudu. Like this is something that he needs to make wudu from it. And then he also said يَغْسِلُ ذَكَرَهُ وَيَتَوَضَّأ, and that he washes his dhakar, which is like his private part, and then he makes wudu afterwards. So this is something that he needs to make. He needs to, as the Prophet ﷺ says, one, it breaks wudu when the medhi comes out, because anything that comes out, it breaks wudu on the way out. And then also the Prophet ﷺ told him that he needs to wash his dhakar, like the private part, and also make wudu after that. And so this is something that comes into this particular thing that comes out. And of course, the basic principle: anything that comes out that is wet is najas from any of the private parts. And so, and the next thing and there's also one other thing that comes out that is also like besides urine and medhi and many. There's also another thing that is called wedi, and the wedi is it's something that like comes out at the end of someone urinating, and there's sometimes like a fluid that is like that's like a elastic fluid that will like come out at the end of it, and this is also najis. Like so, all of these things are najis, except for the many, and the reason for many is the exception, and it doesn't fall into this general category, is because the Prophet ﷺ, he used to have many that was on his that would be on his clothes. And when he went to Salat, Aisha, she narrates that she would either wash it. She would either wash it with water, and she could see like the remnants of it with water, or sometimes she would scratch it off. And of course, like anything that is najis, the method of Shafi'i is that it needs water to wash it off. You can't, anything that is najis, it needs to be washed with actual water. And so like scratching would never be enough for something that is najis. It needs to actually be washed with water, because water is the thing that actually purifies. And things don't get purified except with water. And so if she scratched off the many and he knew about it, and she didn't wash it with water, and he went and prayed in it, then this means that this is something that was acceptable for him, and it wasn't necessarily something that would invalidate the salah, and it's not something that is impure. And also, other of the evidences for that is that this is the beginning of mankind. And Allah says that He has وَلَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي Adam, that Allah has given us that takreem, which is like something that is made us noble. And so for our beginning to be something that's actually najis, for like the root or like the seed of insan or mankind to be something that is actually najis in its essence, this is something that is hard to see how that goes in line with this. And so this is the view of the Shafi'i madhab, is that this is something that is pure, but it's sunnah for someone to wash it. Of course, if it gets on something, it's sunnah for them to wash it, but it doesn't invalidate their salah. But this is the difference here. And when it comes to the actual many, which is like the semen, as opposed to the other things that will come out. And so the next thing that he gives as a principle here is that وَغَسْلُ جَمِيعَ الْأَبْوَالِ وَالْأَرْوَاثِ وَاجِبٌ إِلَّا الْبَوْلَ الصَّبِيِّ الَّذِي لَمْ يَأْكُلِ الطَّعَامَ فَإِنَّهُ يَطْهُرُ بِرَشِّ الْمَاءِ عَلَيْهِ. And so he says, and washing all urine and feces is obligatory. And this is obligatory to make sure that the person, if they ever come to a salah, that they need to make sure that they have been that their body is pure from any type of najasa that's on it. And of course, we talked about in istinja, or like the bab, when we're talking about bathroom etiquette and cleaning oneself after using the bathroom. This falls into this general principle that washing all urine and feces is obligatory. So of course, washing it off of ourselves, this is something that is like in general sense is obligatory. And then also, if someone else's, like this somehow happened to fall on it, whether it's from an animal or something, all of this is obligatory to clean off. So like all of these things would be najasa, even from other animals, like the urine of another animal, whether it was a cat, dog, a camel, all of these things, all of these different types of like urine are something that is najas, including the animals that we eat their meat, such as like a camel or a cow. Their urine, in this case, or like a sheep, their urine would be something that is najas. And this is the view of the Shafi'i madhab. So all of urine and feces is najas, and it's obligatory to wash it. And he says, he gives the exception here of the one type of urine that is treated with differently, and that is the urine from a baby boy that hasn't eaten food yet. His urine is cleaned by sprinkling water on it. So the bol is sabi, which is a sabi is like a young boy. It's like a boy that is still breastfeeding, and this is for a boy, not for a girl. And this is for a baby boy that is breastfeeding and he hasn't eaten food yet. So he hasn't ever eaten food in a way that actually is like maybe he, like at the beginning of, it's sunnah for someone when they have a newborn, to get a little bit of dates. And then to like the person that does this, it's called tahniq, and they would put the dates in the person. They would chew up the dates a little bit to make it like a little mesh, and then they would put it on the roof of the baby's mouth when they're little. As soon as right after they're born, they would do this, and this is of the sunnah for that. But this little bit that he takes in, this is not something that breaks this ruling, but rather as long as he didn't eat in the way that was actually like nourishing him, or that he was actually getting full from eating, like just trying little food here and there, as like little babies, a lot of times you'll feed them food so that they get used to eating until they actually eat in a way that is actually giving them sustenance, and then they fall into this category where if they ever have any urine and whatnot, it's not treated in a harsh manner such as like it needs to be washed, but rather, he says here, his urine is cleaned by sprinkling water on it. So if you had just a little bit of water and you sprinkle it on the place, say if I was holding a baby, and then he like got me wet with something, so then I could just sprinkle water on the place that he did that, and that's something that's enough, as long as I don't smell anything, of course. But like I can just sprinkle it, and it doesn't have to be actually washed to where I'm getting rid of the actual thing that's there. And so this is one exception that's made as a rukhsa for the baby boy, and it's not for the baby girl. And the evidences for that is that the Prophet ﷺ in a couple different hadiths, he was brought a baby boy and whatnot, and of course like the Sahabis, they would bring the Prophet ﷺ, they would bring them their boys either to do the tahniq, as I mentioned, or just like to get his blessing on them. And so he was holding some of them, and they would like occasionally they would pee on the Prophet ﷺ, and he was very he was very gentle about this. This is not something that he took as a hard thing, of course, with the best of manners. And he asked for water to be brought, and then he sprinkled it, or put some on it, and it's just very wet. And he didn't wash it. And so this is a hadith that comes from Qais, and she says that the Prophet ﷺ, he brought her baby boy, and it was someone that hadn't eaten food yet, and so and then he brought him, and then he peed, and then the Prophet ﷺ, he just sprinkled water on it, and he didn't wash it. And so this is something that is for the baby boy. Is in another hadith, the Prophet ﷺ, he says when it comes to for the boy, that he says yundahu bawlul ghulam wa yughsalu bawlul jariyah. And so he says you sprinkle for the boy, and you wash for the baby girl. And so this is something that we take what the Prophet ﷺ said. We maybe don't understand what's the difference between a boy and a girl. Like, this is something the scholars, they try to come up with different wisdoms behind it. But this is what the Prophet ﷺ said. So when we take the rukhsa where it comes, and we leave it at its we leave it at the asl, or like the foundation, and when it comes to like the girl. And so there is a difference between them, and whether we understand the difference between it or not, this is something that the Prophet ﷺ, he made it easier for the boy boy than the girl when it comes to like the baby boy and girl. And Allah knows best. The wisdom behind the difference. This is something that the scholars, they have lots of different views about it, but it's all something that is it's not necessarily based on anything that's super clear. And then the next thing, the author here, he mentions Abu Shujaa, rahimahullah. He says, وَلَا يُعْفَى عَنْ شَيْءٍ مِنَ النَّجَاسَاتِ إِلَّا الْيَسِيرَ مِنَ الدَّمِ وَالْقَيْحِ مَا لَا نَفْسَ لَهُ سَائِلَةٌ. And so he says, and there's nothing that is forgiven from unclean things, من النجاسات إلا يسير من الدم والقيح, except a small amount, yes, al-yasir, which is like a small amount of dam, which is blood, and of qayh, which is pus. And in essence, pus is, in its essence, it is blood. Like, it's blood that is been that is like festered and like changed its actual like consistency from blood, but it's rather like a bunch of dead blood cells and whatnot. So in essence, it is still blood that's just changed into another form. And so this is in general blood, and there's consensus that blood is something that is najis. And of course, when it's inside of your body, that's not something. But when it comes out, the blood that comes out, it's something that's najis, and that's why he says nothing is forgiven from unclean things except a small amount of blood. So blood is najis, and then the small amount of blood that comes out in pus from the person, like this small amount is something that's overlooked. It's something that it's najis, but it's something that it's overlooked for the person. And say someone got a cut on their arm and they're gushing blood, and this blood, if they were to put something on it, it would just pile up inside of the package that they have there. So this is najis, but since it's on them, it's their arm, they can't do anything about this. Like, this is something that's forgiven for them, and this is also like there's examples of some of the Sahabi when there was a Sahaba that was standing guard, and while he was standing up, he wanted to pray in the night prayer. So he started praying, and someone, one of the kuffar, they saw him and they shot him with a bow, and the arrow came into him, and I think he pulled out the arrow and whatnot, but there was blood pouring out from him, and he finished his salah while there was blood. And so some of the people would say, oh, there's blood falling out, so this proves that the blood isn't najis. But the view of the majority, and there's actually like Imam Nawawi, he says that there's ijma' that blood is najis. And so when we look at this like this, we say he's forgiven for for the najis, because there's nothing he can do about it. It's something that he has no control over his body bleeding or not bleeding. So he's allowed to pray. And the same thing with Umar radiallahu anhu, while he was in salah, someone came up and stabbed him, and this is and like assassinated him while he was in his salah, and blood was pouring out, and he would pray while there was blood pouring out. And this was something like before he actually passed away, in that time there would be blood pouring out of his wounds, and he would still be praying. And so he's allowed to pray, and of course this is something he has no control over. And so this is the view of the this is how the Shafi'is, they look at this and they say he's excused because of the Allah la yukallifu Allahu nafsan illa wus'aha, like that Allah doesn't burden a person with more than he can bear. And so he's only burdened with what he can bear, and so this is something that's more than what he can do. So he says here a small amount of blood and pus, which has no blood running through it if it died in a glass, and this is for the person's own blood and whatnot. If someone else's blood comes onto him, then he needs to wash this. The same thing with someone else's pus. If it came onto him, then he needs to wash this as well. And also he says, what has no blood running through it if it died in a glass. And he says, وَمَا لَا نَفْسَ لَهُ سَائِلَةٌ إِذَا وَقَعَ فِي الْإِنَاءِ وَمَاتَ فِيهِ فَإِنَّهُ لَا يُنَجِّسُهُ. And so he says here that except, he makes another exception, which is something that has no blood running through it. And this is, he says this, مَا لَا نَفْسَ لَهُ سَائِلَةٌ. This like term here means like something that has no, they would call they thought, this was coming up from their belief that the nafs, or like the soul or whatever of something, is something that is contained within the blood. And so if there's blood inside of it, then then it has, they would refer to it in this way. That's something that doesn't have blood. And so they'd say like a bug, because the Prophet ﷺ, he in a hadith that is narrated in Sahih al-Bukhari, he says, إذا وقع الذباب في إناء أحدكم فليغمسه كله ثم ليطرحه فإن في أحد جناحيه شفاء وفي الآخر داء. And so he says, the Prophet ﷺ, he says, if a dhubab, which is like a fly, falls into the ina, or like the glass, or like if you had like a glass of something, of water, if it falls into the glass of one of you, then you should plunge it, dunk it into the water and like drown it, and then throw it away. And then فَإِنَّ فِي أَحَدِ جَنَاحَيْهِ شِفَاء. And then he says, because in one of the wings there is the cure, and in the other there is a sickness, a da', which is the sickness. And so he says this, and this is another thing. Maybe we understand it, maybe we don't. But this is something that comes from wahi. It comes from revelation. So if a fly ever fell into one of our, like a glass, I have a glass or something, and a fly falls into it, I dunk it, and then I throw away the fly, and I can still drink the glass. And in general, all of the things that die, and as he'll come up here in the next, at the end of this, he'll talk about all of the things that are dead animals, are something that, dead animals, which goes into like flies and all of these things. These are something that in general is impure. So if I were to put something impure in water, it would make that water impure. This is the line of thinking here, is that if we're allowed to put this in here, this is an exception to the rule. And of course, like flies fall into water and whatnot. If we had to throw out water every single time a fly fell in, then this would also be a hardship for us. So the Prophet ﷺ, he says here that we dunk it and then we throw it, and then we can still use this water, which is understood from the hadith, that this is something that we can still use. And if it doesn't, and he said and that if this doesn't make it najis, then this is an exception to the rule. And so he brings us in the exception of what is forgiven for that. And so this is something that is forgiven. And of course, this is if it fell in by itself, not if someone threw a dead, like someone had a cockroach, they smashed a cockroach or whatever, and then they threw it into the water. This water now is najis, according to the Shafi'i madhab, because they threw something najis into the water, just like if you were to throw a piece of, like if you throw something that's najis, like a piece of najis, into the water, it would make the water najis. So it's the same view here. And so, but if it fell by itself, such as it was flying around and it fell by itself, this wasn't something you did. Since it's something that it happened, this falls into what the hadith says here, that if it waka, either waka dhubab, which means that this is the action of the dhubab, like the fly itself. If it fell into it, not if it was thrown into it. Like if it was thrown into it, it takes a different ruling, according to the Shafi'i madhab. So the next thing that he says here after that is, he also says all animals. He says وَالْحَيْوَانُ كُلُّهُ طَاهِرٌ. And he says, and all animals are pure, like that are alive and whatnot. He says all animals are pure. And then he gives the exception, إِلَّا الْكَلْبَ وَالْخِنْزِيرُ وَمَا تَوَلَّدَ مِنْهُمَا أَوْ مِنْ أَحَدِهِمَا وَالْمَيْتَةُ كُلُّهُ نَجِسَةٌ إِلَّا السَّمَكَ وَالْجَرَادَ وَالْآدَمِيَّ. And so he says that all animals are pure. Al-haywan kulluhu tahir. And so this is a basic principle. Everything is pure until proven otherwise. And so all of the animals are pure until until proven otherwise. And then the evidence that comes for the exception here, he says illa al-kalb wal-khanzir, which is except for dogs and pigs, and whatever is bred from them, and like one of them or both of them, whatever is bred from both of them. If there's like a dog pig that was mixed, or there's a pig mixed with something else, or a dog that's mixed with something else, then this would be najis. If it, of course, like if it's born from like a female dog, because if it was born from something else, we wouldn't know if that was like a dog that was the father or not. We wouldn't be sure. And so this is the view here. And the reason for dogs is because the Prophet ﷺ, he said, إِذَا وَلَغَ الْكَلْبُ فِي إِنَاءِ أَحَدِكُمْ فَلْيُرِكْهُ ثُمَّ لِيَغْسِلْهُ سَبْعَ مِرَارٍ. So the Prophet ﷺ, he said, if a dog licks into the dish of one of you, then he should throw out whatever the contents are in it, and then he should wash it سبع مرار. In another riwayah, أولاهن بالتراب. So 7 times. He should wash it 7 times, and the first of which, in another riwayah comes, and the first of which is with mixed with turab, which is dirt. And so this is the way that the Prophet ﷺ told us to deal with any dishes that a dog has licked inside of. So we get that if the dog, by doing this, needs to be dealt in such an extreme manner, then the dog is something that is also najis. And we look at like the way that the Shafi'is, they look at the dog in particular, is they see the dog is constantly panting. And the dog is constantly panting, so the mouth is something that gets a lot of airtime, like the air that runs back and forth. It's something that his mouth would be like the cleanest part of the dog. And so if it's the cleanest part of the dog, and this is what we need to deal with when it comes to a dog dealing with a dish and whatnot, and this is the way we treat the dish, then in this sense, the rest of the body takes the same ruling. So the rest of the body is also najis, and there is no reason that we would throw away this water that is like money. It's like something that is useful. There's no reason we'd be commanded to throw away something that is useful unless it became najis, and it was something that was now impermissible to use for an actual reason. Because like in general, the Sharia never tells us to throw away something that is useful, like to squander money and whatnot. This is something that is prohibited in the Sharia. So if the Prophet ﷺ, he told us to throw away this, فَلْيُرِكْهُ, like to throw away the water, to dump it, then this is something that it shows that this has changed it's changed that. And also in another hadith, the Prophet ﷺ, he says, طهور إناء أحدكم إذا ولغ الكلب فيه. So the Prophet ﷺ says like the tahara for the vessel of one of you, if a dog licks in it, is to deal with it in this manner. And so like to say that the tahara for this is to understand that this is something that actually purifies it. And if it's purifying, why is it purifying except that it's something that's najis? And so from this hadith, we get that this is how we deal with if a dog licks into a dish. We need to wash it, and one of these times needs to be mixed with actual dirt. So it needs to be like a muddy consistent. So you can like mix it with water and it's a muddy, and you can do this like the first time, and then you can wash it afterwards. And some people have said that like that there's a special consistency. There's a certain like bacteria in the dog's mouth that there's no way like that kills that bacteria like there is in the dirt. Like the dirt actually kills the bacteria, and this is something that scientists have looked into and affirmed in that. And this could be like pointed to like of the miracles of the Sharia from that. And also other people have said maybe you can use something other than dirt. It doesn't need to necessarily be dirt. But the Prophet ﷺ, he said وَعَفِّرُوهُ الثَّامِنَةَ بِالتُّرَابِ, that the Prophet ﷺ, he says to wash it with one of these times with dirt. So since he said dirt, and this is something we don't understand, why seven times and not 3 times like the rest of everything else, but he actually said 7 times. So this is something that we don't understand the meaning of it, and we take it as the Prophet ﷺ told us to do it. So he said dirt and he said 7 times, we do it. And this is and the Shafi'is, they look at this and they also take that this same ruling for the dog also applies for not just his mouth, but it applies for the rest of his body as well. So like if something that is najis and came from the dog to the other person, so like say it was urine from the dog or something, or if it was feces from the dog, all of this takes the same ruling as that. It would need to be washed one of the times with that, and the rest of that. Or if a dog got wet and then he sprayed you with his when he was shaking, like all of this would need to take that very extreme looking at that. And also in looking at the dog himself, the dog has a certain ruling that comes into the Sharia, that the Prophet ﷺ, he said with the dogs that a dog should not be taken into possession unless it's for like 3 different things. Unless it's a dog that is a hunting dog, or it's a shepherding dog, like it's a dog that's used in like farming, dogs that are trained dogs, that they can help someone round up sheep very well. And like these shepherding dogs they're trained, they're very useful. So this is something that is exception. Someone can take this, or also for for guarding. But as far as having a dog just as a pet and whatnot, the Prophet ﷺ, he also said someone who takes the dog as they take a dog that isn't from these reasons, it's understood, but that they get 1 qirat, and they get 1 qirat, which is like a massive amount of reward. They get 1 qirat taken away from their deeds, their good deeds, every single day for them having that dog. And also the angels don't enter a house, like the angels of blessing, they don't enter a house for that has a dog in it or pictures. And so this from these like dogs are not something that we in opposition to like the Western mindset. They have dogs on their bed that sleep with them and whatnot. This is something that is prohibited in the from Islam. And of course, if somebody has a guard dog, they keep this guard dog in the outside if they have it for that reason of that it's a guard dog. Or if they have a shepherd dog, they don't bring this into their house and let it sleep with them and whatnot. And they would deal with all of the dogs in this way. If they found a dog that licked their dish, if they want to use this dish, then they need to wash it the 7 times. And this is something that is that goes to we might not understand the meaning of it, like the reasoning behind it, but we know that the Prophet ﷺ, he told us to do this, and this is how we deal with it. And the next thing that he also mentioned here, not just for the dog, but he says the khinzir as well, like the pig. And so like this is the pig is the reasoning for this is they'll say the pig is worse than a dog. Like the dog has this type of this type of way that we would look at it, and so the pig is in a worse state of the dog because we're not even allowed to own a pig in any circumstance. And the dog we're allowed to own in a couple different circumstances, whether it's for guarding or for shepherding or for hunting, like a dog that will fetch like the birds of prey, or like if we were to shoot birds and go birding or whatever, you'd have a dog that would pick it up for you. And so these are exceptions of it, but the pig there's no exceptions for it. We're never allowed to have it. And so this is something that he says is, if the dogs are in this case, then the pig is like this as well. And really there's no clear evidence in this, and since this is something that we don't understand the meaning of it, we don't necessarily make qiyas here. And Imam an-Nawawi, he talks about that this has very, very weak evidence for the pig to also be treated in this same manner with the 7 times. But it's something that we do agree that it is something that's najis, because otherwise we would be able to eat it. So since we're not able to use it in any shape or form, then this is probably due to it being najis in and of itself. And also whatever is bred from them, because if it's whatever is from something that is najis also takes the same ruling as the najis, because this is, in essence, it would still be like that. And Allah knows best. And then the next thing he mentions here is he says, وَالْمَيْتَةُ كُلُّهُ نَجِسَةٌ. And so he says, and Mayta is a dead animal that is not slaughtered Islamically. So any animal that, say, animal ran across the street, you got a deer and he got hit by a car. This deer is Mayta, and this is something that is not, it's not slaughtered. Like we didn't slaughter it Islamically, but rather it died from the impact of the car hitting it. And so in this case, this is something that is Mayta, and it's impure. And if it's impure, of course, we can't eat it. And he gives an exception here, except for fish, locusts, and humans. And so all Mayta, and also going into Mayta, like an animal that is electrocuted to death, or that is gassed to death, like this is Mayta. And so a lot of the animals in the factory farms and whatnot, when they throw them into the factory slaughterhouses and whatnot, a lot of times they won't actually even slaughter these animals. They will be killed first, and then they'll be cut their throats afterwards. And so if this is the case, or if they're banged in the head until they're shot with like a bolt that kills them before they actually get cut their throat, then this is Mayta. And so this is something that even if it was by a Christian or by a Jew that did this, this is something that would still be Mayta, and it's something that's impure. And then also if it's impure to eat anything that is najis. And unless someone is like they're gonna die and they don't have any other food. And then he gives the exception here for Mayta, except for fish, locusts, and humans. And of course, fish, we don't slaughter them. We don't slaughter fish. They die when they're taken out of the water. And the Prophet ﷺ said that the al-hillu maytatuhu, when he's talking about the bahr, he's talking about the sea, that he said that the dead things of the sea are permissible for us to eat. So the fish in the sea, we're allowed to eat them. That goes to all like the crabs and all of these other things that are sea animals. We're allowed to eat them without them being actually slaughtered in an Islamic way. And this comes from the hadith that the Prophet ﷺ said regarding like the fish of the sea they're meta because they're not slaughtered, but we're allowed to eat them, so it wouldn't be najis. And so then also locusts are another thing that are an exception. So locusts are allowed to be eaten, and of course like there's no slaughtering of a locust. Like this is a big thing, and of course like some like the Arabs, they find this as a very good specialty because there's about a lot of meat in the actual body of a locust. And so this is something that that it's allowed to eat, and of course like it's not necessarily slaughtered, so we can eat it. We can eat it in spite of that. And also humans, this is not something we would eat, but we also, when a human is dead, we don't say that he's najis. We don't say that his body is najis. Of course, if there's something from his bowels that comes out afterwards, that is like actual najis, such as like feces or whatever, then this is something that is najis. But himself, he's not najis. The humans are not najis after they die. And so and also anything that is cut off from an animal while they're living, this is also najis. Like this is something that is meta. It's considered meta. So if you had like a animal, say there's like a cow or something, and somehow his ear got chopped off, that ear that got chopped off is najis. And even though like if you slaughtered him, he wouldn't be najis when he died. But it being chopped off in that way, whatever comes off of something that while it's alive is also najis. And then that there's hadith that shows that particular meaning. The next thing, I know we only have a little bit of time left, but the next thing that it says here, just to finish the chapter, he says وَيُغْسَلُ إِنَاءُ وُلُوغِ الْكَلْبِ وَالْخِنْزِيرِ سَبْعَ مَرَّاتٍ إِحْدَاهُنَّ بِالتُّرَابِ. And so he says here, the dish that a dog or pig licked from is washed 7 times. One of the times with some dirt. And so we talked about the hadith before, like showing that the dogs and pigs are najis, and we looked at the hadith, and this is basically showing the ruling of the hadith, that it's washed 7 times, one of the times with dirt, and using the first time as like a muddy, what he means with dirt is like mixing the water with dirt. And so like the first time it'd be like you'd have like a mud, and to use at the beginning is better but it needs to be used in one of the 7 times. You could use like a muddy paste and whatnot, and you could wipe that, and then after that you can you can wash it with water, and then that's finished. And just making sure that all of these times at least accomplish 7 times, and the first time would be the one that actually cleaned the dish. So if there's any najis that you see from it, it needs to be wiped off, and then whenever that najis is actually moved from it, then after that that's the first time, and then there's 6 times after that until we make up the 7 times. And then the next thing that he says here is the ويكسر من سائر النجاسات مرة تأتي عليه والثلاثة أفضل. And so he says the next thing, he says that all of the rest of unclean things are washed with water, going over it 1 time. And 3 times is better. So it's like sunnah is to wash it 3 times, as you know, like washing our hands 3 times before putting them into the water when we wake up from sleeping. This is one of the things. So using 3 times is like the sunnah, to wash something with that. And the first time, like washing it, he says that the water needs to come onto it at the very least. So if we have something that was najis, for instance, say najis fell onto a certain place, and I know that it's on that certain place, and then it dried, and I don't see any remnants of it, that najis still needs to be washed. There's a najis that's a hukm, like a ruling of najis that came onto it, so it needs to be washed. So at least water needs to run over it, and then that would be it. And if there is something that I see of actual najis particles, then the thing that I see of it needs to be washed until it's removed, and then it's then adding 2 extra times over that to make the 3. This is sunnah. And then the last one here is, he also says, and if wine becomes vinegar by itself, he says إذا تخللت الخمرة بنفسها طهرت. If wine becomes vinegar by itself, it becomes pure. And he says وإن خللت بطرح شيء فيها لم يطهر. And he says, and if it becomes, but if somebody puts something in it during the process of wine becoming vinegar, then it doesn't become pure. And there's also a general principle that wine is something that is anything that is intoxicating, such as wine and whatnot, that is originally in liquid format, then this is something that is impure. And so, like, wine is something that is impure, and so, but if it becomes vinegar, and of course we can use vinegar, but how does vinegar come into that process? It goes through the fermentation process. So at one of the stages, if you were to make vinegar from grapes, then we would at one point we would be ending up with wine, and then it would change into vinegar. So during that process, if it happens by itself, like if the wine turns into vinegar without us putting anything into it, then in this case it is pure. But if we put something into it, that thing that we put into it becomes impure when we put it into wine, because wine is impure. And we put this thing into the wine, say I put yeast or something into it. That yeast now has become najas. And when the wine would turn from najas to purity by itself, then this yeast is najas, and it's sitting inside the wine. So when this would turn pure by itself from changing, the yeast itself turns it back into impurity, if that makes sense. And just like if you were to have if you were to put something impure, like if you were to put some piece of najas inside of water, it would make all the water najas. So if you put something into the water that became najas from if you were to put something into the wine, it becomes najas because you put it into wine, which is najas. So when the wine changes, that thing still is najas, and that changes the wine that is now vinegar, that is pure, into something that is najas. And so this is it's kind of like a tricky thing. If you don't understand it, let me know. But this is how like if wine becomes vinegar by itself, it's pure. But if we put something into it while it's wine to speed up the process, then this is something that it doesn't become pure, because that thing we put into it changes it back into impurity once it would become pure. And the sides of, like, if we have like a barrel and whatnot, and that barrel is what the wine is in, and then it turns into vinegar, the sides of the barrel don't turn it back into najas. This is something that is agreed upon, of course, and Allah knows best. Inshallah, in the next class we'll go into the last chapter of the book of purity, and that it encompasses like menstruation, postpartum bleeding, and some other things that regard women. And of course, this is something that is important for, of course, women to know, and also for men that have women in their family to know, because most of the time women are not someone that ask a lot of questions about these things, because it's something that they're shy to ask about. But to understand the basic concept is good for every man to know. Of course, he's going to get married, and his wife will need his wife will need to know what to do, and if he teaches her that, then this is good. And also, if he teaches his kids that are like if he has girls and whatnot, then he teaches his girls the basics of what they do in these cases. So this is something that is important and oftentimes overlooked, and we'll go in that in the next class. وصلى الله وسلم على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت وأستغفرك وأتوب إليك.
فلذلك فادع واستقم كما أمرت ولا تتبع أهواءهم وقل آمنت بما أنزل الله من كتاب وأمرت لأعدل بينكم الله ربنا وربكم لنا أعمالنا ولكم أعمالكم لا حجة بيننا وبينكم الله يجمع بيننا وإليه المصير.